I haven't really seen, you probably have, but it's interesting to watch Trump flail a bit as this Epstein thing has blown up. And I haven't really seen him in a flailing that has continued this many consecutive days as we have seen now.
Oh, he's got a real tiger by the tail here. Trump was so clear that he would release these files. We now know why he doesn't want to do so. The FBI took apparently more than 1,000 personnel off of duties like counterterrorism, espionage, white-collar fraud, and assigned them to go through the Epstein file documents, hundreds of thousands of pages. In fact, there's been one reference by one of the people who was connected with prosecuting the case that there are more than 1 million pages of information to flag everything that mentioned Trump by name. Now, Donald Trump can survive politically a lot of things. He can survive his utter incompetence. He can survive lying every day of the week. He can survive making up the most ridiculous accusations and praise. For example, thanking the National Guard for stopping violence in Los Angeles when they hadn't even been activated. But I don't think he can survive evidence that he's a serial child rapist. And what matters here now is keeping this story alive. And that means finding new angles and things to pursue. So there is out on the internet the interview with the young woman who says when she was 13 that she was instructed to disrobe and to give Donald a hand job, and then told she had to wear a glove, presumably a soft furry glove, and that there was another girl in the room, and that they were 12 and 13 years old. There are about 24 women who've made serious allegations against Trump, and we have the judicial finding in the E. Jean Carroll case, which he is now trying to get out of by saying, well, I said that as president of the United States, therefore I'm immune from any liability. And it is astonishing that the Republicans, who have for 50 years called, more than 55 years now, 56 years, call themselves the party of law and order, that they are unwilling to look at this. And I think the obvious conclusion is they're unwilling to look at it because they know what it will turn up. So let's imagine that some of this information gets out. Somebody leaks FBI 302s. That's the report, a summary report filed by FBI agents, or some other piece of documentation leaks out. I just don't think Donald can survive that. He'll attack it. He'll say it's fake. He'll claim, as he did with the Wall Street Journal, that the Jeffrey Epstein letter is fake. So what needs to happen here is that journalists, people who feed information to journalists, need to keep finding new angles and new ways to keep this alive, because you're already seeing some of the people who criticize Trump, who are Republicans, start to back away and say, well, I went too far. I shouldn't have insisted on that. I'm sure the president has his reasons. That needs to be tamped down and directly questioned at every opportunity. But there is plenty of smoke there. Let's be clear. There's no fire. We don't have any solid absolute proof, but there are just huge billowing black smoke that Donald Trump is not just a child rapist. He is a serial child rapist, that it was a normal part of his life. And the coded language in the letter to Jeffrey Epstein on his 50th birthday, enigma. Now, what word, if you wanted a code word, might you describe a 12 or 13-year-old virgin? Enigma sounds like a pretty good word to me, because it's a mystery who you're going to turn out to be. And the woman in particular, whose video is online, says that she should be happy that it was Donald Trump who took her virginity, not some incompetent 14-year-old boy. Fits perfectly Donald's view of the world and the way he speaks about things like this. And of course, we have the Donald himself saying that he told the 10-year-old girl, in 10 years, I'm going to be dating you.
Right,
Plus
right.
things he said on the Howard Stern show. I mean,
Yeah.
remarkable things on the Howard Stern show that you could dismiss at one time as tasteless braggadocio, but in the context of all this other evidence. And imagine, by the way, if all this was evidence against Barack Obama.
Oh,
What
I
would
mean,
the Republicans be saying here?
so Trump, alongside others, Dershowitz was an Epstein attorney. He was also a Trump attorney. Bill Clinton, Bill Gates. I mean, you had this constellation of very powerful people who were all with Epstein repeatedly. Trump traveled frequently with Epstein, it seems. I mean, if you look at the flight manifest, which I've seen written about, it looks like there are enough trips with Epstein to these various places where Epstein had residences that there's a guilt by association that I'm sure Trump already feels puts a lot of stink on him, right?
Well, I'm not sure Donald would feel it puts stink on him, but he would be scared of it, that's for sure, and troubled by it. But, we don't need to just look at the sex angle here. Let's look for a moment at Jeffrey Epstein and his business. Jeffrey Epstein was a teacher at a private school, got fired after being hired by Bill Barr, the former attorney general's father. He briefly works on Wall Street, undistinguished career. And suddenly he's managing a lot of money for Leslie Wexner, the Ohio multi-billionaire who started Victoria's Secret and ran various other retail clothing enterprises. I'd like to see the trading records for Jeffrey Epstein's investments of Leslie Wexner's money. I'd like to see the distributions that were made to Leslie Wexner. And let me be clear, my expectation is there are few trading records and they don't show any spectacular returns, and probably no distributions or very minor ones to Leslie Wexner. Where I'm going here is that I think it's clear that Epstein's business was extortion. He compromised people and then he was able to extort them. And the way to get at that is follow the money. And so why not release the trading records? Now, I'm hoping that some members of Congress and journalists, start asking that question. Well, if you're uncomfortable with some of these records, what about the trading records, the financial records of Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, he's dead. What's the issue here? You're worried about Leslie Wexner's privacy here in terms of the investments? And it's crucial that this story not go away. And that means, in journalism terms, from 60 years of doing this almost, you got to keep finding new angles and new issues to raise.
Well, the Wall Street Journal, they certainly weren't going to let the story die. They, as you say, they had that expose with the birthday card and that you've quoted. And what does Trump do? He sues them. I mean, he makes up, first of all, this, it's a case involving defamatory speech, and he makes up the number of 20 billion. I guess he just sues everybody. Don't you have to show, David, you know this stuff so well, you have to show damages in a defamation case, right? At
the end of the day, you have to show damages, but when you make your demand, you can put any number you want there, no matter how ridiculous.
So he's doing that. He's barred the Wall Street Journal, as you know, from coverage. That is to say, there'll be no Wall Street Journal correspondent involved in direct White House coverage. So he's doing that, and other news organizations. Just because you mentioned other news organizations, I'm sure on some level they're concerned that they might end up in the same tank.
Yeah, maybe. Trump's overplaying his hand here, I think. First of all, you will not see this suit go very far, because the Wall Street Journal, if the suit goes forward, has what's called discovery rights. It's the same reason Donald has threatened me more times than I can recall, only once to my face, but usually on the phone, that he's going to sue me. He's going to, see my children. Of course, they're all grown now, but my children will be homeless. But he never did, because he knew that I would get the opportunity to question him under oath, or lawyers working for me would. And the one time he did pursue a case against my former colleague, Timothy O'Brien, for his excellent book on Trump, where he put a price tag on Donald's wealth, less than $200 million, which I think is in the right ballpark at the time. He lost, and he gave testimony that was very damaging to him because he just lies about everything. So there may be some hesitance about pursuing matters with Trump, but there should be no hesitance by members of Congress. Members of Congress have congressional immunity, and they should be working on a strategy to keep bringing this up in different contexts and establishing, lie after lie after lie. They should also be making moves to preserve the record so that we don't end up with a disappearance. And let's remember two things. When Jeffrey Epstein was arrested by the Trump administration's Justice Department in his first term, search warrants were executed on his properties. And we know from the inventory logs and things in the public record that among the things they found were huge lists of people. Doesn't mean that they were clients of his. I never spoke to Jeffrey Epstein, but had I done so, I would expect my name would be in there. And also what the record strongly suggests is photographic evidence of grown men engaged in sex acts with underage girls. The language is the language of simply making an inventory, but boy, is it suggestive. And if I'm correct that Epstein's real business was extortion, then that would make absolutely perfect sense. But keep this story going. People are watching this show. When your congressperson shows up, even if your congressperson is a Democrat who gets this, what the issues are, bring it up. Encourage them to keep pressing these issues. Don't let this go away.
I want to talk to you about the politics of it here in a second, but I wanted you to read this comment, which I think is insightful. Karen Combs says, if the letter was fake, that's the Wall Street Journal published letter, the birthday card letter. If the letter was fake, wouldn't they fake something clearer and something that just looks like a note and not some weird script type writing? Is someone protecting Maxwell in prison, Karen asks.
Well, apparently the Justice Department is sending somebody to talk to
that. Not just somebody; it's Blanche, who was Trump's old attorney. David, he's the number 2 at the Justice Department.
Right. And Ghislaine Maxwell is in a position to absolutely tell what's going on here. She's also in a position to be pardoned by Trump.
Exactly.
If she were pardoned by Trump, the way that would backfire, she could call before a congressional committee, and let's assume the Democrats get control in the next election, which is not certain. They could put her under oath, and because she's not subject to any charges anymore, either answer the questions or we're going to jail you for refusal to testify, and we can prosecute you for that. But the government, not to interrupt, but to interrupt. Sorry, but that deal you're talking about, or that conversation you're talking about, that Blanche is going to now have with Ghislaine Maxwell, it seems to me, David, that's behind closed doors. They can kind of choreograph what she's going to say, dry clean it of anything that could be particularly damaging to Trump, and then in return for that then public testimony, I guess, she might get what? A pardon, a modification of a pardon seems like it might be a bridge too far, but some kind of modification of clemency, release for time served. There are a bunch of things they can do. And at the same time, there can be a subtle series of implied threats that even if you had the tape, you can't show they were actual threats. I mean, we're not talking about unsophisticated bumpkin lawyers here. We're talking about very sophisticated Manhattan lawyers, Blanche among them. So it's just, I think it's absolutely crucial to keep this going. I hope some of the young women who are now middle-aged will work up the courage to speak and provide more documentation and evidence. I hope you can get Julie Brown of the Miami Herald on your show.
She's Hall of Fame for her work.
The most astonishingly dedicated work on this case. And we really, I mean, think about this, Ron. Much as I think having J.D. Vance in the White House would be its own nightmare, do Americans really want to have an accused child rapist? And that's what Trump is. He is an accused child rapist. They want to have an accused child rapist in the White House? Do they not want to know, was he or wasn't he? If Trump is as innocent as a 12-year-old girl, why wouldn't he be eager to put the records out there? And by the way, you mentioned just before I came on the Martin Luther King stuff. I'm reminded of what the White House tapes from Lyndon Baines Johnson's presidency showed. Hoover had a tape recording of Martin Luther King with some woman having sex, not his wife. And Johnson's response was something along the lines of, "Oh, Edgar, nobody has ever heard of the minister sleeping with a woman in the choir."
I didn't know that story. That's great. I want to ask you the last thing about essentially the 3D chess politically. So Congress goes home early because they don't want to have to vote on the Epstein file.
Are they actually done that now, or are they still just talking?
No, that's the plan. But that seems to be the plan. They've kind of lined up those chess pieces. Then, as you say, I guess it's just public outcry that keeps it alive because the congressional component is gone. And on some level, Trump then just lets it fade. I mean, he sues the Wall Street Journal. That he's doing a lot of things. That's why I was saying he's flailing, David. He's doing a lot of things that sort of vault it back up to the top of the headlines as opposed to letting it fade.
Yeah, this is the only issue I think that can force him to resign or result in his arrest. Nothing else is going to do that I can see any sign of. But I don't think this is a survivable issue. So while Congress is out of session, those Republicans who are willing to hold town hall meetings, and there's not many of those, they should be confronted by their constituents, including Republicans, saying, we need to know, is Donald Trump a child rapist? And don't use euphemisms. Don't beat around the bush. When some Congress member says, well, I think that's kind of strong, you say, oh, really? You think sex with a 13-year-old girl is anything other than rape? Are you going to defend Congressman having sex with a 12 or 13-year-old girl? We're not talking about a 12 or 13-year-old boy or 14-year-old boy. We're talking about a grown man. And I think the Republicans really need to be pressed on this issue and not be able to run away. And that's the citizenry. That's ordinary folks, people listening to this show, your friends, other people you know. Keep this issue alive because it matters.
I want to ask you about, I want to pivot about something we were asked about on this show, and I promised that I would ask you about it. It's related to economics and sort of the tariff policy, which seems chaotic and inflationary, et cetera. Without getting into all the X's and O's, we kind of know the broad strokes of it. Why hasn't that shown up in the economy more, was the question that is being asked, and it likely will. When will it?
Well, so the tariffs that have been imposed illegally by Donald Trump, except for very limited circumstances involving national security matters, he doesn't have any power with tariffs. That's a power held by Congress. Just look at Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The very reason we created our Constitution was so we could tax ourselves through our Congress, that plus regulating business. Remember, we live in the Second American Republic. The first one, Articles of Confederation Government, which had no power to tax, failed. The amount of material that is being imported into the country is not the whole economy. That's number one. Number two, a lot of companies loaded up on goods when they saw this coming, and they've been working through those inventories. But you're starting to see this show up, and it will show up increasingly going forward. Now, there's one other aspect to this is, Trump claims that there are world leaders who called him up and said, oh, Mr. President, thank you. We're so grateful, for these tariffs. Nobody did that. That's just complete ridiculous nonsense. But it also tells you something. Donald knows that these countries he wants to put tariffs on, they understand what tariffs are, unlike him, and they know he doesn't have the power to really do this. They can take him to court. Their customers can take him to court and get the illegally imposed tariffs back. And so they have no motive. Now, if Congress starts to move on tariffs, that would be a very different matter. But you are going to start to see this happen with prices. Prices ticked up a little bit in the most recent month. It's the trend line that you want to look at. And because a tariff is ultimately almost always paid by the consumer. I mean, an importer could say, all right, we're going to take a narrower profit margin to maintain our market share. Then the importer makes a smaller profit, and their business is therefore less successful and less stable. But be patient. It's going to show up, and you're also going to start seeing it show up more in food prices. There's plenty of video out there right now about crops rotting in the field. Where I live in Western New York, we are a major apple producer. There's 5 families that have a basically lawful cartel in the apple business, and I'm looking forward to seeing whether they have the people they need to harvest those apples. What's going to happen with the crops that are coming in right now? You know, strawberries from Watsonville and Santa Cruz County, they come in all year long. They come from Mexico. We get vast amounts of our produce from California. California is grossly disproportionate producer. And with the raids, there are going to be damages.
Well,
we've already seen
for
some
sure.
dairy farmers saying they're having trouble maintaining their herds of cows because they don't have workers.
So you see agriculture that really can be hobbled by this. I don't know what the fix is for this. You know, David, I remember under Trump, season 1, when he was first in 2016, winning that election, he imposed tariffs that did affect farmers. And as I recall, and it was a mess also, although not as advertised a mess as this seems to be.
It costs you and me and everybody else $28 billion in subsidies to make up for the lost market.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to get to.
$28 billion to the farmers who would prefer to grow crops than get welfare. And it turned out to be a huge boon to Brazilian soybean farmers who now dominate the market with China. China's a huge consumer of soybeans. And it also benefited the family of Elaine Chao, Senator Mitch McConnell's wife, because they are in the dry bulk cargo business, and it's their ships that used to go from the U.S. to China with soybeans. Now they go from Brazil to China with soybeans.
That was wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. And I'm just wondering how the bailouts are going to work this time. You know, I mean, as you said, those last bailouts are close to $30 billion. And it's to farmers who want to farm. They don't want to get bailouts. So, yeah, this cost will be even higher. And just on the handful of people who control so much, 9 households control 15% of the wealth in Silicon Valley. I mean, this is something that you talk about all the time, wealth inequality. I mean, it's astounding.
That's a story that broke this morning in the San Jose Mercury, where I started out when I was a teenager as a front page staff writer. 9 households own 70% of the wealth in Silicon Valley. 9. Now, this is what I've been warning people about for 30 years since I started documenting how government policies are creating this highly concentrated wealth, which has, in economic terms, no utility. That is, if you've got $10 billion, having $11 billion makes no difference whatsoever to you, unless you're a deal maker. If you're Carl Icahn, you're buying and selling companies, yeah, it makes a difference, but not to anybody else. And we now have billionaires in the centibillionaire class, right? Hundreds of billions of dollars. And yet we have all these families who depend on food banks, who are on Medicaid, who are house poor, whether they're renters or they're buyers. They're spending 30, 40, 50% of their income. And that money does not and cannot trickle down. The reason for that is people with moderate incomes spend all their money. They don't have any savings. The United Way movement about 11, 12 years ago, I was the first person to write about this, developed a new poverty measure called ALICE. Asset limited. You don't have any savings. Asset limited. Income constrained. You're not making very much money. You have a low salary or wages. Employed. So you're working, but you don't have any savings, and you have barely enough money to pay your bills, and maybe you don't have enough to pay your bills. For a married couple with kids who need daycare, they have for every county in the country, but in the urban counties where that's most of the money is made in this country, it takes close to $90,000 to escape poverty, to be able to have a stable economic life. And if you don't have children in daycare and there's still 4 of you, it's $80,000. The official government poverty measure for a family of 4 is less than $30,000. I talk to people all the time who are telling me how strained their budget is. And then I find out, yeah, they both work and together they make like $120,000. They don't have any savings. And there are some things I could point out to them that they could save money doing. But that really tells you how the economy has changed. And it's exactly what I warned about in my books, Free Lunch, Perfectly Legal, and The Fine Print, and my book, Divided, an anthology, and hundreds of articles and columns I've written in the last 30 years. It is government policy that is creating this. And one thing I really want your audience to know, and I know we need to wind up, is many companies and some individuals who control companies have turned the corporate income tax into a profit center. When I broke that story 25 years ago, people called the New York Times and wrote letters and said, who is this crazy person from an insane asylum? And then Congress ordered a study. They produced a 3-volume, 1,800-page report that showed I was exactly right. And the reason is this: you make a profit, and this year the tax rate on your profit is $1 billion. And you defer that tax for 30 years into the future. You don't have to pay it for 30 years. And there's all sorts of mechanisms to do this. You just got a $1 billion zero-interest loan from the government. A zero-interest loan from the government. When you pay it back in 30 years, you're really paying back not $1 billion, but about 300 million or so, based on historic inflation rates. And in the meantime, you invested the $1 billion and you've turned it into $3, $4, $5 billion, but you still only owe the tax on the first one. And then the earnings you made, you defer those too. And twice now, Congress under Republican presidents, George W. Bush, and then in Trump's first term, passed a law lowering the tax that would be paid on this deferred money if it was held overseas, where most of it is, where they only paid a quarter of the tax that was owed. Instead of 35%, you'd pay 8.25%. You got a 75% discount, and you didn't even have to bring the money back to the United States. All you had to do was pay the tax. You could keep the money offshore. The reason that you and I and everybody else isn't doing better isn't some failing of ours. It isn't some weakness in the American economy. It's a Congress that is approving all of these measures, and state legislatures approving these measures, and city councils and county boards of supervisors, or whatever your county legislative group is called, putting in place policies that take from you, usually silently and subtly, and give to the very rich. So when you go to a big box retailer, there's a very good chance the sales tax money does not go to the police and the schools and the library. It is kept by the owners of that store to pay for building that store until the bonds that were used to pay for it are paid off. In 20 states, politically connected companies get to keep forever the state level, not federal, but state level income taxes withheld from their workers' paychecks. It's a story I broke in 2011, I think. 20 states. And I mean, we're talking about big companies, and some of them are foreign companies like Mitsubishi and Continental Tire, which is a German firm. But News Corp was one of them. So people really need to pay attention to these policies. And they also should be asking, why, if our federal debt is a problem, as Trump and the Republicans keep saying, are we borrowing more money to finance tax cuts for the richest people in America?
Well, the CBO just published this new analysis. Yeah, right. 3.4 trillion added to the debt over the next 10 years.
That's just in addition to all the already scheduled increase in the federal debt. That's just an add-on. That's a cherry, a huge cherry, right, on the top of a very ugly cake.
You see the bankruptcy of these calls for, they're just a total philosophical bankruptcy, these calls for, restraint, fiscal restraint. It's just absurd. We're way over time. I love our conversations. And it's when you talk about this stuff, you have written about it for years. I mean, these books, which I'm going to link to under this video, if you click through, it's all here. I mean, this has been going on. It's been a slow moving train, but wow, it's picked up a lot of speed lately,
And it's going to get worse because of those rules concentrating that wealth and reinforcing that wealth and not taxing it. I want people to be wealthy. I want people to prosper. Just pay your damn taxes. Don't go rent a congressional vote so that you can escape paying your taxes. Make, what Bill Gates said, my fortune, if we had a proper tax system, would be 1/3 the size it is.
Right on. Thanks, David. See you next week.
Take care.
David K. Johnston. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.